So a lot of drivers just want to improve the overall look of their car. Maybe they're hoping to improve the performance, the grip, the handling. And one of the most common mods that people do to their car is alloy wheel upgrades or alloy rim upgrades. So if that's your thing, there's a few things just to bear in mind, and it can be done quite cheaply. And there's a few little sneaky facts that once you know, it opens up a whole world of opportunities for you. So you've got your car, you've probably got an older car with 17-inch wheels and you want to go up to 18-inch wheels, or you're going from 18 to 19 because they look better. So is there a downside to increasing the wheel size? Well, we have to be careful because we're adding weight, and this is unsprung weight on each corner of the car. The rest of the car is sprung, it's through the suspension system, so everything is damped and controlled, but the wheels are not. They're subject to the road bouncing around. So every little pothole and groove that we hit with a larger alloy wheel, we will feel more when we're driving it. So wider wheels, bigger tires tend to increase the performance, the grip and the handling, but in the real world you probably won't notice that very much. You might notice a more crashy ride, and when the road is dry you will certainly have more cornering grip, but when the road is wet it can actually be detrimental to have wider wheels. We've done other videos looking at the problems associated with bigger wheels and wider wheels, but in this video I'm just going to focus on some of the tricks and tips for upgrading them. So the stud pattern that we've got on our wheels, some cars have 4 studs, some have 5, some have 6. So as long as the new wheel fits that pattern nicely, you can upgrade to those wheels, providing there's enough room within the wheel well to accommodate that wheel, it's not rubbing on the arches, and also making sure that the brakes themselves have got enough clearance around the inside and there's no new components from the wheel touching them. So if we're going to a larger wheel, there's generally going to be more space for the brakes, and people might talk about upgrading the brakes at the same time. And if we're going to a wider wheel, we just need to make sure that there's enough space within the wheel arches to cope with. So often manufacturers offer a car with different sized wheels. If we take an Audi A1 for example, a small family car, and we want to upgrade the wheels, we might be looking at the performance variants of that to go up 1 inch or even 2 in the wheel size. Now the trick comes into looking at that stud pattern. It's described as a PCD, so it tells us the distance between the studs and the amount of studs on them. So the PCD is measured from the center of one nut to the center of a nut completely opposite to it. That works conveniently for a 4, 6 or 8 lug, but what about when there's 5 lugs? Well, in that case you measure from the outside of one nut across to the center of the almost adjacent nut, and that's how you arrive at the figure. The figure is actually in millimeters, it's the distance between them, and it varies from manufacturer to manufacturer because some manufacturers do imperial stuff and others do metric stuff. The other thing to bear in mind is the ET, the offset. So if you imagine your tire and it's got a center line around it, so where the nuts are, or where the holes are in the rim, where that is in relation to that center line is the ET. So an ET of 35 would have a 35 millimeter offset from that center line. So when you fit wider wheels, you can't always go wider inside the car, so you're not keeping the ET the same. So generally speaking, when manufacturers fit wider wheels, most of the extra width goes on the outside, so they would change the ET. So that's something to bear in mind when you are buying a replacement wheel. And the ETs do vary quite a bit. A number of manufacturers, instead of having a fixed recommended ET, they've got a range for each given rim size. So depending on the inch diameter of the rim, they will recommend a different ET. So do your research carefully. There are cheap replacement options out there, and if you go to a breaker's yard you can often get a bargain set of nice looking alloy rims from a sportier model or a newer model that will fit your car. But do check out particularly the PCD, otherwise they're just not going to fit at all, and the ET gives you a guidance as to how far in or out of the wheel well they will sit, and you just need to make sure there is sufficient clearance with your brakes and when you turn from lock to lock that the wheels aren't rubbing on the wheel arches. And in a lot of areas, a lot of countries, it's illegal to have a wheel protruding further than the edge of the arches. So just be aware of your local regulations so you don't get caught out on that one. So on the Audi A1, it's got a 100x5 or 100x5 stud pattern. So any of the other Audi models that have this same pattern will fit. So we might think about looking at the next size up car. Now, interestingly, the Audi A3 actually uses a 105 by 5 or 105x5 PCD. So those wheels wouldn't fit on the A1. But the Mark 1 A3 still had the 100 by 5 or the 100x5 wheel stud pattern. So those Mark 1 wheels would fit. So you might be able to get a really nice set of performance wheels for an A3 and get them to fit to your A1. So this expands out to all the other makes and models out there. As long as the PCD is correct and the wheels are bolt on nicely, you should have very little trouble upgrading to them. So there's a lot of aftermarket wheels offered out there that are made by various manufacturers that have got various styling options, but a lot of people want to keep that OEM, that original equipment manufacturer look. And one of the ways of doing that is just to look at other models from that manufacturer. And if that manufacturer also shares models with other groups, this can widen your options even further. So in the case of our A1, we could start looking at other Volkswagen, Seat, Audi or Skoda brands of car and fit those wheels as long as the PCD matches. So if the PCD doesn't match, we've also got the option of changing the hubs. So in most cars, it's a relatively straightforward thing to change the hub and the hub size. We obviously got to do it on all four wheels, so there's a little bit of expense involved in that. But most cars made today are fairly modular. So manufacturers don't change everything for different models. They try and keep the base spec of the model or the skeleton of the car as similar as possible. And it creates this Lego situation where we can upgrade the car relatively easily. So I hope this little tip has just helped you out. Please boot the like button. It really does help us to get out there. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. We don't want you to miss out. We want you to stay tuned. And I've lined this video and this playlist up for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in this next video.